Hello. Uh, so I know I haven't really done a video on this yet, so first time for everything. Ice Queendom theory time. So it's a little bit late to be doing much in way of plot theories for Ice Queendom. The finale is in 2 days of me recording this. It's Friday. The finale comes out on Sunday. So this theory is not a plot theory. It's not a theory on where the story's going, because the story, aside from one episode, is done. No. This theory is about how the Nightmare Grimm works and why it seemed to have different effects on Ruby and Jean versus Weiss and Blake. So my current thought is that it has to deal with a past or future thing. Not time travel, really, but let's look at the nightmares first. Let's look at the nightmares that we have to work with. Our first nightmare to work with was Jean. Jean's nightmare set the precedent for what the story would focus on when it came to Weiss's nightmare. Plus, it set up for his own immunity to the Nightmare Grimm itself. So, this nightmare was living up to the arc name. Much like Weiss, Jean feels that he has a responsibility. The arcs were great warriors ever since the Great War, but Jean has this anxiety that he is not the same, that he's not worthy of being that way. And it's not difficult to see why. Jean was very inexperienced. He doesn't know what aura or semblances are. He never went to a preliminary huntsman school. And whenever his parents found out that he was going to Beacon, which to me says they know he snuck in with fake transcripts, then the thing that they found out was, or not found out, the thing that they said was, don't feel bad if you have to come back home. So they didn't even have faith in him. So when we see Jean's nightmare, what we see is Jean as a kid in a very vulnerable state of mind, with his armor, sword, and shield all mocking him. They're all mocking him, and they're all also personified via the Pumpkin Pete mascot, which makes sense. Jean has the Pumpkin Pete hoodie, and he has the Pumpkin Pete onesie. And we even see in the nightmare, he's wearing the Pumpkin Pete onesie. And weirdly turns into Pumpkin Pete. Kind of. He gets the rabbit tail and rabbit ears. And that's as far as the nightmare went before the rest of Team Juniper were sent on by Shion Zaiden and saved him from the nightmare. Weiss's dream comes up, and it is... oh, it's something, alright. It's a really weird version of Mantle and Atlas, where the workers are actual people, but the citizens of Atlas are shadows, like the Volume 1 background characters, which I'm convinced 100% that was a visual reference to that. But anyway, we also see her counterparts to everybody. We see Jacques as this over-looming figure in her life that's intimidating. Whitley is a bat that annoys her. Willow is another one of those shadow people, because even though her presence is around, she's not really there. She doesn't really have an impact because she's so complacent to everything that's happening to her children after she fell into alcoholism. Winter is a book because Weiss and Winter have spent a lot of time apart and communicated via letter. It's not like there's a worldwide communications network still up in their universe or anything like that. Definitely need to be handwriting stuff. I don't know why they were doing it by letter. I don't know if it's because Winter is a high-ranking official, so communications are restricted to work. I don't know. Off topic. That's a new theory. Why were Weiss and Winter only talking via letter and not via scroll? I'm not doing a theory on that. We see her versions of Team RWBY. RWBY is in a much more childish outfit. Her weapon is backwards. Blake has cat claws and a cat tail. Yang is... I don't even really know how to describe Yang in Weiss's Nightmare, because it's really not all that different from Yang to begin with. Aside from Ember Silica, it's far more powerful. Jean has like 3 different versions. He has himself, he has the Winter outfit, he has the cloak with the Legend of Zelda sword. Nora and Ren just have Winter outfits, and Pyrrha has a purified version of Weiss's Mistral outfit, specifically the longer version of it that she wore at the charity in Volume 4, which we do see later on in Ice Queendom, representing Weiss's heart. Interesting that Pyrrha was wearing it then, huh? Schneekos and White Rose fans, y'all are eating this anime up, I'll tell you that right now. Y'all got meals, y'all got feasts and buffets out of this series. But anyway, that's Weiss's, and that is so far off from Jean's. Then you have RWBY's, which is the next one that pops up, where she gets a nightmare inside of Weiss's nightmare. And that nightmare is about her not feeling like she's worthy of being a leader, like she's not worthy of her friends, that Weiss hates her. We see that even though there's that moment initially of everyone clapping for her, the rest of her team, Team Juniper, the professors, even Tai and Zwei are there. But then everything disappears. They're all the little mini, like, doll things that Shion uses to send people into dreams. And we don't really get to see much more than that, because it's not long after that Jean puts her to the giant sword, which is the immunity, and it brings her out of the nightmare. And then there's Blake. Blake's nightmare about becoming like Adam. She wears an outfit like Adam's, except there are no pants for some reason. She has his mask. She has almost identical everything to him. Her version of Gamble Shroud is a mix of Gamble Shroud and Adam's Wilt and Blush, to the point that it's able to mimic Adam's semblance Moonslice. She spouts off all these things about hating the Shnees and hating humanity for what they've done to the Faunus. All that are enough to snap Weiss out of it and free her from the control of the Grimm, aside from the fact that not really. It started to make the Grimm weaker because it was a nightmare versus a nightmare. But it also was helped by the fact that RWBY was destroying the nightmare with Crescent Rose and the Silver Eyes. And that brought Weiss out of it, and then everyone else was able to help Blake out of her nightmare. But I wanna do a little theory on why are these nightmares so different? Why do Weiss and Blake have such radicalized nightmares, but RWBY and Jean don't? And obviously, I feel like the main reason, sort of the like production reason, is they're not the main focus nightmares. RWBY's nightmare is not a main focal point. Honestly, it hardly even does anything, to the point that I don't even think it was worth doing it. I don't even think that they really should have done it, because it doesn't really do anything for the story, because it happens and then it so immediately doesn't happen. It happens, it's done, like that. It basically did nothing for the story, in my opinion. And Jean's is literally, it only does the two things I mentioned earlier. It sets up how the nightmare works, and it gives Jean the immunity so that he can be important in the story later on. Which apparently made a lot of people mad. I don't understand the Jean hate. I don't understand the Jean hate at all. But then you have the other two nightmares that are the focal point. Weiss's, which is where the entire thing of Ice Queendom even begins. That's why it's named that. And then you have Blake's, which is meant to be the Deus Ex Machina of the story, essentially, without really being a Deus Ex Machina. I feel like the Silver Eyes are more that, and even then, RWBY doesn't even use them more than once, because she doesn't really know what she's doing with them. But anyway, I feel like there is an in-universe explanation as well. And it ties to the thing that I said earlier, that it has to deal with the past and the future, not in a time travel sense, but in a story sense. If you think about it, Jean and RWBY don't have traumatic pasts. They don't. Jean is very unsure of himself, but that's only because he wants to prove himself. He doesn't have a traumatic past that led to that mindset. It's just he wants to prove himself because he knows what his family name means, and he wants to live up to that. RWBY doesn't have a traumatic past either. RWBY was raised by a loving family. Summer really wasn't there because she left to do her final mission, which seemingly has to do with saving RWBY. If we follow the context of it, had something to do with Salem. We follow the lyrics to Red Leg Roses Part 2. It seems to have something to do with that. So even though she left, she was doing it out of wanting to protect RWBY, as opposed to, say, you know, Raven. But Ty was there, and even though Ty had fallen into depression after losing his second lover, he still ended up being a better father after the Yang situation, where Yang took RWBY to try to find Raven, and they had to get saved by Crow, and Crow probably had like a stern talking to Ty about having to have a wake-up session. So, she's raised by these people that love her, and she's never really had a traumatic experience in her past. She's just always been very bubbly, albeit antisocial, just because that's how she is. Flip the script and we talk about the two polar opposites that are Weiss and Blake, who have had traumatic pasts that are opposite one another in terms of world context, but are also quite similar. Like, they're both horrendously traumatic pasts on very different levels. Blake is a faunus, so she is born into a world that hates her people. So she grew up facing discrimination. She grew up going to those rallies. And as far as we know, Gira had been in charge of the White Fang her entire life up until she was 12 years old. That's when Gira and Kali would step down from the White Fang and Sienna Khan would take over. And Blake opted to stay with the White Fang. Why Gira and Kali let their 12-year-old daughter make the decision to stay with a group that they knew was becoming more radicalized, I'm not entirely sure. But we all have our vices. We all have our vices. But that would lead to 5 more years of her being a part of this organization that was steadily becoming more violent, more angry. And, of course, there's her relationship with Adam, where Adam, who is 5 years older than Blake, they met when she was 12 and he was 17. When they met, he kind of started the process of trying to make her into a version of him. So she would be willing to follow him to the ends of the earth, no matter what. And of course, she eventually realizes, maybe I don't want anything to do with this anymore. I still want to make things better for the faunus, but I don't want anything to do with bullhorns over here. So she leaves. But we know that she had been groomed, she had been abused, she had been gaslit. She's had a very rough past. And we know Weiss also has, because we know that Weiss grew up in this abusive home. At around 10 years old, Jacques revealed that he only married Willow so that he could get the Schnee name, and therefore a right to the company when Nicholas would step down. And he also, bit of a groomer, trying to groom the kids into being mini versions of him. This is why Whitley puts that on. Whitley doesn't actually believe the whole "it's foolish not to do as father asks" thing. He's only doing it to save his own skin. He knows that if he doesn't act like he agrees with Jacques on everything, it's going to go bad. He's doing it as a defense mechanism. Winter and Weiss constantly throughout the show defy Jacques because they've grown out of that. But Weiss has a problem with the White Fang because she blames them for what Jacques did to her. Her exact words are that when Jacques would come home, he would be angry, and that made for a very rough childhood. And we know he's a physical abuser. He does that to her in Volume 4. We know that he is an emotional, mental abuser. That's probably his biggest tool, is playing with people's minds and emotions. So, you have these two characters whose arcs in the main show are moving forward and not being defined by their past. And that's why their nightmares are so intrinsically tied to their past. While Ruby and Jean have their anxieties and have their problems, they don't have a traumatic past. Rather, for them, it's an anxiety about where things are going. And we know that their future is a bit of a traumatic future, assuming the real world remnant versions of the Ice Queendom variants are going down the same path, which they probably are. Everything else has gone like that for the most part. And the next episode is called Best Day Ever, which happens to be the name of Volume 2's first episode. They're probably going to have these same traumatic futures that Jean and Ruby in the canon series have. So it's very much the radicalized dreams are for the past that they already have definitively shown and talked about, creating these horrific nightmare variants versus the unclear, uncertain futures of Ruby and Jean, thusly making a very loosely put together nightmare. I'll be honest, I literally only just thought of this like a few minutes before I started recording. So, unlike the previous theory, shut up, duck. Unlike the previous theory where I had been sitting on it for a few weeks, I only just came up with this, so this could be all kinds of wonky, all kinds of off. I don't know. I'm just spewing my thoughts. So let me know what you think. Are you excited for Ice Queendom to end? And if so, is it because you want to see how it ends, or is it because you just want it to end because you don't like it? Because honestly, considering how much of a seesaw of quality it's been, I think either one is valid. But for now, that's going to be it, and I'll see all of you in the next video. Bye-bye!